At a very, very young age, I noticed that I could see things, feel things, hear things that not many other people were experiencing. I've been able to communicate with the other side, and I've actually been able to make contact with loved ones. I got rid of my apartment, I quit my job, I put my stuff in storage. And then at about 21 was when I had my first experience communicating with a loved one on the other side. I knew I was a medium in that moment. And when I'm in that place that I consider my sanctuary, I can invite a spirit guide in. I'll ask, can one of my guides come in? The biggest message really that's coming through right now is just not resisting change. When we don't resist change, we allow things to happen in the way that they're meant to unfold.
Hello, and welcome to the Jeffrey Eisen podcast. This podcast is about using spiritual wisdom, insights, principles, and practices to integrate and embody into your life in a practical way. My guests share their story of their spiritual journey, as well as how their spiritual beliefs, insights, and practices have helped them live a better life. Their life stories help others understand and accept life's challenging opportunities for learning, expansion, and growth. And my guest today is Rebekah England. Welcome again to the Jeffrey Eisen podcast. Rebekah is originally from Woodstock, Ontario, spent some time in Toronto, and now is in beautiful Bali. Welcome, Rebekah, to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Why don't you start off by telling the listeners a bit about yourself, your personal history, the gifts you have, the work you do, and what brought you to Bali?
Great questions. So essentially, the work that I do is I've always kind of had a gift for communicating and working with energies that aren't necessarily perceived by the five senses. So I've just been kind of working with that and building it for about the last 5 years now, fully in depth with it. And I just found that, living the city life, it kind of gets prioritized rather than doing what you're truly passionate about. So that was kind of what guided me to Bali to come here and just be in a space where I can focus on building my practice and focusing on what I want to do. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. So, yeah.
And tell us a bit about your practice maybe and how you got into doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my practice with meditation. I would say maybe about 9 years ago. I started really working with meditation and delving into meditation, and I started opening myself up to experiences of energy that I wasn't normally exposed to or used to or taught about. And so that brought me into learning about energy healing, learning about Reiki, learning about crystals. And so my background is in meditation and crystal healing and energy healing. However, through doing that work, I found that I really, really, really connected with spirit guides. And so I've had experiences before in the past where I've been able to communicate with the other side, and I've actually been able to make contact with loved ones. However, when I open myself up to that communication of allowing myself to communicate with the other side, I always notice that spirit guides come in. And so for those of you that aren't too familiar with spirit guides, there are a group of beings that's always working with us and always here to support us and help us and heal us. So I realized that in opening myself up to communicating with the other side, it was the spirit guides that always wanted to communicate with people, and those were always the messages that were coming through in meditations and in healings. And so what I did was I figured out what I can do to offer a service that benefits people, as well as give myself the freedom to work remotely. And so now I'm just offering readings where I communicate with spirit guides for the people that I'm working with, so that they can hear the messages that maybe they're not necessarily receiving clarity in, or maybe, some people have a hard time quieting their minds. Some people just haven't made that connection before. So what I do is I bridge that line of communication for the people that I'm working with, so that they can receive any messages that are trying to come through.
Fabulous. Good stuff. That's great. You must enjoy being the interpreter translator, so to speak. It's sort of like if you worked at the UN, and but what you're translating is so much more exciting than just from another language, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very cool. And the most fun part about it is I never know what's going to come through until I make the connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Tell the listeners maybe about some of the more interesting experiences that you've had bringing messages forth to people from the spirit guides.
Right. So, oh gosh, there's there's a lot I could go with.
Well, just let the spirit guides nudge you as to one of the more interesting ones that maybe our listeners would be interested in.
True.
Okay.
I mean, it's sorry.
No, if nothing comes, then we'll move on to something else.
Very true. I mean, I think it's kind of cool when things come up for people, that it's kind of like I not in a sense where I'm not actually doing a specific reading, but I just hear like a strong message come through. Like, for example, my friend, she does hairstyling. And so I kept like hearing this message, like she's going to be celebrity stylist. She's going to be working with celebrities, or however it's going to pan out in the future. And then like, I think it was like within a week and a half later, she got hired at a salon who was very connected with a lot of like very well-known people. And that like the salon itself almost has like celebrity status. So I thought that was really cool. It's not like huge, but just like that little message is
right.
A cool piece of confirmation.
Well, and in cases like that, sometimes that confirmation is enough to build someone's self-confidence and sense of worth that they can get on and do amazing things. My experience with the invisible world is that they will guide us in a way, but it's really up to us to make the choices. So, taking their guidance and applying it is really, really important, because otherwise it's kind of neat. A lot of people like to have readings, but if you don't do anything with that reading, if you don't internalize it and take action, often you're just left with this pleasant experience that felt great. And I'm a big fan of taking our spirituality and applying it in a practical way to make our life better.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to take action, and you have to do the inner work. Otherwise, you're just kind of like hearing what you need to do without any results.
Mm-hmm. How have your spirit guides helped you in your life up to this point?
Oh, I mean, the fact that I can say that I'm working remotely is definitely like a huge piece, because there was a few moments where I was just kind of like, why did I I in order to get here, like I got rid of my apartment, I quit my job, I put my stuff in storage. I pretty much got rid of like everything in my life that takes away from this lifestyle that I'm trying to create. And so there was a few moments where I was just kind of like, why did I do this? And I really just had that confirmation of like, you'll understand. And then things just kind of fell into place. Even with the pandemic happening, like it's, of course, like it's an unfortunate circumstance, but because Indonesia is getting like visas, they're getting free visas. So now I get to stay here longer without having to like worry about like doing a visa run or all the things that kind of go into like what you need to do to stay here. So it's pretty much like being able to be in the place where I want to be. And once I first got to Bali, I knew that I wanted to stay here for longer. So it just kind of like, I just really had that reassurance that like it's going to happen. It's going to happen no matter what you do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it did.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Rebekah. A lot of people don't quite understand the subtlety or the vagueness of communication from the invisible world, because most of our communication here on Earth is very specific and very to the point. Communication from the higher realms, from my perspective, is a little bit more general, and we need some interpretation. So getting that
Yeah.
confirmation might be as good as you get. They're not going to give you a checklist of do this, do this, do this to get your practice up and running. I often find
Yeah.
it's like a treasure hunt. They give you one piece at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that analogy. It's like a treasure hunt
Yeah.
because it's true. You get a message and then you kind of have to, you work with it and you go into it, you do the inner work, and you can't really have all the answers because the answers unfold as you go about exploring them.
Yes, that's why patience is very, very important if you're going to work with your spirit guides, and also being comfortable with the unknown, because I'm sure
Yeah.
that at times it was a little difficult packing up your apartment, leaving your job, and trusting that this would all work out. So you really kind of have to
Yeah.
have a lot of faith. I'm a firm believer that if you don't have that faith, and if you don't have that deep sense of belief, that you won't be able to connect in the first place.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's true.
Yeah. Any advice you would give to the listeners about how they can connect to their own spirit guides?
Mm. So one thing that I always recommend is working with numbers, and you can always ask your guidance, like obviously of course communicating with them, letting them know, um, hey, I acknowledge you, I want to work with you, I want to connect with you and get to know you more, is like the first kind of spark of building that connection. And then you can also use things like numbers, for example. So you can ask them, what numbers will you show me to let me know that I am on the right path? And so once you start kind of asking that question, you'll notice certain numbers will appear in your life more. Like you'll look at them more, you'll be drawn to them more. So for me, my numbers are 1s and 4s. So if I'm doing something or I'm unsure about something and then I see 1s and 4s, it's kind of like that confirmation, like you're on the right track, you're on the right path. Or if something happens and I'm just kind of like going with the flow, and then I start seeing the numbers on the way, I'm like, okay, this is still where I'm meant to be. This is still what I'm supposed to be doing. So something as simple as like just communicating with them, letting them know you want to work with them, and asking them to start showing you what, well, it could be an omen too, but numbers I find is very practical. So like asking them, what numbers can you show me to let me know that you're working with me, that you're with me, that I'm on the right path?
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. I'm a big numerology fan, and I love numbers as confirmations and affirmations. And
Yeah.
so once again, we need to develop a different way of communicating. If you were dealing with a human being on the planet, you'd say, well, just tell me if I'm on the right path, yes or no. But they don't
Right.
operate that way. So I think numbers are a great
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
it's like we are free will beings. We have free will. So they can guide us, but it's up to us to either take their guidance or to not. Like you said about doing that inner work and taking that action. They can give us guidance, they can give us answers, but it's up to us ultimately to put that into place in our lives.
Yes, that's a really important point because a lot of people don't realize or have unrealistic expectations of
Hmm.
what the spirit guides will do. We do live on the
Yeah.
planet of free choice, and it's so critical that we realize that all they can do is give us guidance. We are the ones that have to take the action and make it happen.
Yeah.
That's the law of the universe, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Tell me a bit about how you began communicating with your spirit guides. How old were you? Did you have the support of your family? Did it feel a bit strange? A lot of people are very curious as to how to begin this process. They ask the question, do we all have the ability to communicate with our spirit guides? And I believe so. So maybe you want to share with the
Hmm.
listeners how you opened yourself up and became more welcoming to that guidance.
Right. So I definitely believe that everybody has the ability as well. And so for me, at a very, very young age, I noticed that I could see things, feel things, hear things that not many other people were experiencing. And of course, when we're younger, we're a lot more open as well. But as I grew older, I didn't really disregard those experiences because I knew that there was a deeper meaning to life. There was more to experience, and there was, more magic in the reality that we experience than what we're taught. And so, I guess I would say at about when I was 12, I started working with like Wiccan magic and like white magic. So just kind of like working with like herbs and plants, and that's when I actually first discovered meditation. And so once I started kind of working with those energies and seeing results, I knew that there was a force that we couldn't see that we could work with. And so that was kind of like my first time opening up a little bit. And then when I want to say about 17, I discovered lucid dreaming. And when I had that experience where my dream became just as real as my waking life, I knew that there was like this ability to tap into like whole realms of existence. And that was when I discovered astral travel. And I didn't really have too much success with it. I just practiced a lot with like breathing, tuning into myself, um, and feeling the energies around me. And then at about 21 was when I had my first experience communicating with a loved one on the other side. And so I knew I was a medium in that moment, and I knew that that was something I wanted to work with. But on the journey was when I unveiled that it was spirit guides that want to communicate with me the most. So I started working with spirit guides, I want to say, mostly when I started doing energy work and meditations and sessions with people, because the messages that came through were just like straight from like the guidance that was with them. And so I would say that was about like 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But I think that kind of sums up the journey into how that unfolded.
Excellent, excellent. There seems to be a propensity, a desire for people to approach mediums, to connect with people, loved ones on that have passed over. And you said that you started that way, but then that evolved into spirit guides. What do you think the draw is for people to want to get readings from mediums?
That's a really good question. I feel like people want to have their own experience in understanding that there is more to this physical reality than what we're taught. People want to know that what we experience with our five senses is not just it. And people also want the assurance that they're going to be taken care of when, like we're all going to get to a point where our life ends,
Mhm.
and we're not given the knowledge and understanding of what actually happens when that does happen. So I feel like, especially when people connect with loved ones on the other side, it reaffirms to them that there's a place to go, not just for their loved ones, but for them as well. And it helps people fear the idea of death so much less. And when it comes to communicating with like spirit guides or energies, I really just feel like people are at a point where they want to elevate their consciousness in the understanding that we are not the only ones that exist. We are not the only ones here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would concur that often the desire to connect with a loved one is partially because we miss that individual in physical form, but also, as you said, our desire to believe that the death is not the end; it's not final. But I love what you said, and I really believe that it is divinely inspired. That through your work as a medium, it connected you to the spirit guides. It reminds me of how often we like to give angels names and give them wings and give them a bodily figure, and that's so that we could understand more. And if we can then understand more, then we will be able to uncover the deeper communication. And I think in your case, that's what happened, is that identifying your communication with a loved one that's passed on then opened you up to that realm. And from that realm, you got in touch with that which was more invisible, that which did not necessarily have a name, which was the spirit guides. And I'm a big fan that, especially in these times, if you can connect to your spirit guides, then life is a little bit less traumatic. That we can, although, as we said, that advice that they give us is pretty general and not very specific, it does make our journey a little bit less difficult and less challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
How
And
does
especially when you get,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially when you get those messages and then you see how things unfold, it just reminds you that you can trust.
Yes. And that's so important that we get the message, that we trust and follow it, and then our confidence is built up. And I believe connecting with the invisible world, your intuition, is just like a physical muscle in the body. And when you go to the gym, you don't expect to lift the heaviest weight the first time. You try a few smaller weights, and that's how I develop my intuition. And a lot of people that I work with is that you start small, you get that message, you follow it, and the more you follow it and the more it works out, the more confidence and trust you have, because trust and faith vibrates pretty high, and that's what you need to connect to that higher realm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Any advice you give the listeners on how they could connect to their own spirit guides? You mentioned meditation. I'm a big fan of a meditation practice in order to move towards connecting to the invisible realm. What was your experience like with regard to meditation leading to this new communication that you have?
Okay. Well, essentially my understanding of meditation, so of course there's all kinds of different meditations and what have you, but from my understanding of meditation is when you are able to bring your mind into that place of stillness, what you're actually doing is you're neutralizing all the energies around you, like around your around the energetic space, like in your mind. And so it's kind of like a detox for the mind. So once you clear out all that energy, all that unnecessary thinking and frequencies, whatever you want to call it, you get this kind of neutral space that exists around you, which provides you with clarity. And so once you have that clear space, then you can start choosing how you want to engage your imagination. So for me, I kind of work with some, like it varies. But sometimes I work with a sanctuary. I'll create a sanctuary, like a place where you kind of go to that makes you feel safe, like in your imagination. So for me, I kind of have this space where it's like it's over a beach and there's a lot of beautiful trees and there's these really big crystals, and it's just very calming and it brings me like peace and serenity. And when I'm in that place that I consider my sanctuary, I can like invite a spirit guide in. Like I'll ask, like, can one of my guides come in? And I'll just like have a conversation with them essentially and see kind of what messages come through. You can also do like do different meditations where you come up with a scene in your mind, and then you kind of give yourself like little like omens or little activities to do. So like, for example, if you wanted to actually bring yourself to a beach, and then maybe you find a bottle, like a note in a bottle. And so you can pick it up and then take it out and read it and actually see what message comes through for you, because that message is literally coming through your spiritual guidance. So you can kind of work with it that way, bringing in an actual being, or just seeing if there's a message that wants to appear to you in that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love what you were saying about space. I think space is really, really important. The late Wayne Dyer used to talk about the gap between the words, the gap between the notes of music. And creating space, I think, is an important prerequisite for connecting with your spirit guides. The other one
Yeah.
that you mentioned was inviting them in. I think that that's really, really important. One needs to be careful in your invitation, not to be too
Yeah.
anxious and not to have expectations. So you invite
Yeah.
from that spaciousness, you invite from that place of relaxation and knowing. So I love
Yeah.
what you said about that. And the other thing that I love you said is have fun with your imagination
Yeah.
to create the beach or the crystals or the garden. I used to love going down into the garden with the waterfalls. Again, those are
Mhm.
just tips on how to get out of the obsessive mind and to create that space.
Yeah.
And I love the message in the bottle kind of thing, because you know when you find a bottle on the beach, you have no idea what that message is going to be. So once again, that emphasizes that space that you're trying to create, and all of a sudden you open the message and you have no preconceived notion of what it is, and so
Yeah.
you've invited that message to come into you. So those are some great hints for the listeners on ways to begin the practice of connecting with your spirit guides. I would highly recommend it to everyone. I think it's really powerful. We don't have to be alone in this world. And even if
Yeah.
you're lucky and you've got lots of family and lots of friends, the connection to the higher realm is something that's very special. I'm sure that you would agree. It's nothing
Yeah.
like human connection at all, is it?
Yeah. It's very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really fun. And so, why don't you tell the listeners a bit about the stuff you're doing from Bali? I'm assuming you're doing some mediumship readings. Anything else that you are doing while you're there that people might be interested in?
Yeah. So I'm mainly just offering my one-on-one sessions for the current time being. I'm kind of like working on a few projects as well. However, with the pandemic hitting, I didn't want to be super pushy with sales. So I've kind of limited what I'm offering right now to just my one-on-one sessions where I do a reading for the person that I'm working with, and I bring in their guides and see what messages come through for them. And we see so we kind of choose the area of your life that you're working with, and then we see what messages come through, and then we work through the messages to see, like if there's something blocking you, like where did that block start arising from, what can you do to heal that, what is it that you need in order to let go of that. And what kind of like, mindset do you need to shift in so that you can move in the right direction. So it's kind of like a little bit of a coaching session as well. So we bring in a message, see kind of like, and then we work with it. Sorry, I
Yeah.
mix that up. So we bring in the spirit guides, see what messages come through, and then we work through those pieces to kind of see what it is that you need in order for that person to move forward.
Yeah, that's excellent because as we chatted before, those messages do come in a very general, vague, treasure hunt kind of way. And so it
Yeah.
is important to have someone support you as those messages start to come through because it sounds to me, Rebekah, that you are the interpreter. You're helping people interpret these vague, non-specific messages in a way that they can apply to their life. And I think that's really important.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Excellent. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if you could connect to the spirit guides and bring a message to the collective consciousness, if you could just take a moment and channel
Mm-hmm.
something that might be in the highest good of everybody that's listening, what do you think that message would be?
All right, just give me a second. I'm just going to kind of ask them and see what they have to say. I think the biggest message really that's coming through right now is just not resisting change,
Mhm.
especially with everything that's happening. People kind of want to be in that forceful energy of making things happen their way, where when we don't resist change, we allow things to happen in the way that they're meant to unfold. So if something's kind of happening and it's not necessarily going with all the bits and pieces of what you're trying to create in your life, it's really time to take a step back and just allow things to flow so that you can get a better understanding of the direction you're supposed to go in.
Hmm. Fabulous. Thank you for that. I will tell you that I truly believe that you've connected because this morning I channeled something from Shaltazar that I called "It's Time to Embark on a New Journey of Change." And so, for the
Mm,
listeners, that's the way the universe works. This isn't coincidence.
yeah.
We didn't rehearse this.
Wow.
I put Rebekah on the spot. I asked her to bring forth a message from the spirit guides, and it is extremely similar to the message that I channeled
Wow.
from Sheltazar this morning. So that's the way this stuff
That's
works.
amazing.
It's quite miraculous. It's quite unbelievable. Thank you for that, Rebekah, because I
My
truly,
pleasure.
yeah, isn't it amazing how there you are in Bali and here I am in Toronto, and we're bringing forth
Yeah.
very similar messages. And that's the way the spirit guides work. They will send uh, themes to a whole bunch of people at the same time. And that to me is that signal. It's like you seeing the numbers. It's that signal that that's truth, and that's where we want to go. So moving
Yeah.
forward in change is really, really important now. Fabulous.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's so cool. And I love that too, because even sometimes when I'm doing readings, so I have a friend, and sometimes we just do readings for each other. But I had a friend who also has a friend that they kind of do readings for each other. And so I did a reading for her, and she was like, I literally had someone say that to me yesterday. I was like, well, there's your confirmation.
There it is. Yeah. Watch for the repetitions. When you start to hear the same thing, the same word, the same concept 2 or 3 times, that's the spirit guides, the invisible world communicating with you. Rebekah, thank you so much. Before we leave, why don't you tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you? Thank heavens we have amazing technology. And even though you're in Bali, your ability to continue to do readings anywhere in the world is there. If anyone's interested in getting in touch with you for a reading or a one-on-one session, how do they connect with you?
So right now I mostly use Instagram as my platform. I am on Facebook as well. So you can find me under the name Becca, Beka, and my last name is England, like the country. So on Instagram, it's just Rebekah England. And then on Facebook, you can find my page as Rebekah England as well. And I think that's my two main forms of communication. And then you can find my email through my Instagram.
Excellent. And I will have that information in the description for today's podcast if people forget it or didn't get a chance to write it down. Thank you, Rebekah, for being an amazing guest. I really enjoyed it. And
awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, excellent. And thank you. If you want to get in touch with Rebekah, you know that she will bring forth great spirit guide information for you. Hopefully you got something of benefit from this podcast. Once again, my name is Jeffrey Eisen. I'm a spiritual life coach, the channeler of Sheltazar, and an energy intuitive. You can check out all of my resources and offerings on my website, jeffreyeisen.com. Thank you once again, Rebekah. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.